Art-centric podcast with Rafi and Klee.
Hola, you amazing artist. It's Rafi.
And Klee.
And today we're going to talk about being creatively prolific without losing your mind.
Indeed.
It's interesting because before we got started with the podcast, we were talking with our rogue artist community, which, by the way, is here with us right now. So if you hear us reading any comments or questions or any brilliant insights, that's who we're reading those comments from. But we were just having a discussion with them because we're adding a bunch of cool features to our Patreon community, book club, workshops, and spirited sessions. And, our creativity tends to go a little bit further than just paintings and jewelry and sculptures and things like that. Mm-hmm. We're also musicians, also authors, and this kind of thing is the kind of thing that you start jumping on because you start following your passion and you get really excited about something and you become prolific in all areas, right? So we're doing these podcasts and we're creating art and we have exhibitions going on and jewelry and commissions and all these different things. And a lot of times it could feel like you've taken on too much when you're trying to be prolific at something, when you're trying to create a lot. Mm-hmm. And so in this podcast, we're going to talk about not just the level of being prolific in your studio, but being prolific in life and the things that you love. Because I think it's important, so many people around us, so many people say like, well, don't take on, don't get your hopes up. That's going to seem like it's a big thing, like it's bigger than you can handle. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that the only people that could tell you, the only person that really could tell you whether or not you could handle something or not is you, right? And I think that when it comes down to it, the most important thing in like creating a lot of art or creating a lot of anything really is getting down to the nitty-gritty of what the motivation is behind it.
Absolutely.
Because that's the difference between being prolific and burning out. That is the big difference. So these are the things that I want to cover in this podcast and really talk about.
Yeah, and we were discussing with our community how, like in the beginning when you're just kind of feeling things out, you might be sort of taking in external feedback, testing the waters on stuff, discovering what's true for you and what's not, and that's absolutely fine. But I think as you go, what naturally occurs is you really start to feel what's authentic for you, what really lights your fire, what really does it for you. And I think something that is really good, but sometimes difficult for people, is to let go of what's not authentic for them, because they feel bad, or you're not supposed to let go of stuff, or
especially if like they're making money with it,
or if it's lucrative.
Yeah, if it's supposed to be lucrative, but like you hate your life every time you do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So definitely, I feel like it's a constant refining process at this point. Like with our community, we were just discussing how like we're really getting to the nitty gritty of what we absolutely love. What we're totally 100% 24/7 365 interested in doing, what we're doing anyway when the cameras are off that we could share with our community, and just really kind of zeroing in on those things because our creative community, there's folks that are also interested in those things, and I think that goes for anything, is like this refining process of really feeling out what lights your fire, what lights your pilot light.
I think really at the end of the day, it goes back to that like following your passion, right? And following your bliss. Shan says, so for the Idiot's Guide, prolific means making in a large quantity. Saying as the idiots that looked it up earlier.
Thank you for clarifying that, Shan.
It is. For anybody that doesn't know what prolific means, it means creating a lot. Like, so somebody like Picasso is considered a prolific artist because Picasso created a lot of work. It didn't take him very long to create the work that he did. So he was constantly like one thing and then working on another and did sketches and all kinds of things, all kinds of things. And that's the reality of being a creative person, is that you end up having a lot of interest in a lot of different areas, and you're going to want to, you're going to find yourself wanting to explore those different areas. And most importantly, as an artist, express those different areas. Right. And so, and for everybody that's listening to this, that is a painter, that it takes them a long time to work on one painting, right? Because I'll get that a lot. Everybody works at a different rate. It really depends on what you're working on. When I'm working on an abstract or like an abstract figurative piece, it's not going to take me as long as it's going to take me if I'm trying to work on a photorealistic layered piece. You know what I mean? So like, you really have to take everything that we're saying here with a grain of salt as far as being prolific. In fact, earlier, I believe Shan had sent me a comment because I posted a private video on our Patreon about being prolific in the studio and how it is that I work on multiple projects. And Shan had talked about, like, because I said, you want to give your, I have all these different projects, and some of them I do in priority based on the goal of how it is that I want to complete them. And Shan made it made a really good point of, like, some people don't work well with goals, right? Mm-hmm. And you need a lot more flexibility in your studio. So it's like, you got to figure out for you, in your way of doing it, whether it takes you a long time to work on something, or you work on things quickly, or you're experimenting and playing, you really have to figure out for yourself, what does it mean to be prolific?
Definitely.
What does it mean to me to be prolific? Does it mean I work on 20 pieces every week? Or, if I do 4 pieces a month, that's prolific.
And that might also look like you're not actually counting how much work you produce, but you might be actually tracking how much time you get in your studio, or how regularly you get in your studio. That might be what it means to be prolific, rather than finished work.
Yeah. I would say that like I said earlier, the most important thing is, what is the motivation behind it, right? Because, the announcement that we made earlier, it's like, okay, cool, book club, because I want to work on I want to talk about books. I'm working right now, currently, I'm working on a book that is called
Letters from a Rogue.
Dear Artist, Letters from a Rogue. I forgot the title of my own book.
It's okay.
And so, like, I love reading books. A lot of the inspiration that I get from my own life and doing this art career thing, I've gotten from really great books, really great teachers from the past. And so, like, the fact that I'm writing books and putting this information out there, the things that have really connected with me, and the things that I've gone through in my career and trial and tribulations, I love the idea of reading something that is, reading and discussing something that someone else wrote that inspires other people. And so, like, this is part of the prolificness, right? I am a prolific reader. Maybe not, physically reading a book, but I listen to audiobooks all the time.
That's a really good point. It's an ecosystem of prolificness.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the same thing with, like, music. We've released a lot of music. We want to release more music. So it's like involving yourself in these things that you're really, really excited about doing, and then realizing that, sure, maybe I was doing a lot of things before, right? Before Klee and I, we took a few months to, like, really get our heads on straight. We might have been doing a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, when you look at the motivation behind it, so am I being prolific in this area because this is my passion and this is something that I really enjoy? Or am I being prolific in this area because I think I'm going to get something out of it?
Or because I should.
Exactly. Exactly.
Shan said, for me, it was also finding the motivation and lack of fear that it's not perfect so I could finish things.
Yeah.
I think that letting go of your self-judgment is a huge component in being prolific.
Yeah.
Because it takes up a lot of your energy reservoir and actually depletes your energy reservoir to be running this background program where you're judging every single thing you do in the studio. And it's one thing to look at your work with a constructive, critical eye and see like, oh, maybe I can improve this. Maybe this. You all know the drill.
Yeah.
But that critical judgment voice that like just is mean, let it go. It's pointless.
Yeah.
It's literally pointless, and it's using up a lot of your energy, and it's also keeping you in a holding pattern. And so if you can learn, like, you're not going to drop it all at once, right? If your self-talk is negatively oriented, we've all experienced it. Little by little, as you catch yourself talking mean talk to yourself, let it go however you can. Quiet yourself, or be like, interesting feedback, brain part of me, but I'm working here.
Interesting feedback, stick man. Yeah.
Or you could be like, you know what? What's the most loving thought I can have in this moment to silence the stick man, as we call it, that negative chatter that happens in the mind, so that you can free up your energy to create.
That's one of the biggest things that I've looked at, Shan, and that's why I love the point that you made earlier, because like it really is your perspective. Only you know what's best for you. I have done a lot of work on myself when it comes to deadlines, right? And I call them deadlines. I really, I want to come up with different names for like suggest line or something like that. But they're flexible for me, right? So there are certain things that have a deadline. Like I know that I have the exhibition for the minis happening in September. So there's 24 small pieces, and I know that I need to get that done by September. So I'm going to want to like think about how I'm going to work on that. And then at the end of the month, I have another show. And so at that point, though, I'm looking at it, am I going to work on this project that's in like less than 2 weeks, or am I just going to use existing pieces for this exhibition? Mm-hmm. For my daughter's piece, my grandchild is going to be born at some point. So I'm going to want to make sure that this piece is done before that. So when it comes to deadlines, that's really the way that I kind of look at it. But I've also done a lot of work on getting rid of the negativity that's attached to deadlines, right? Because a big part of that is that fear that you're not going to get it done. There's almost like this shame, and you start criticizing. There's shame and criticism, and you start talking, well, I'm never going to be able to do this, or you're such a loser, you're so this, you're so that. And really it ends up happening. When it does end up happening, I've gotten really good at pushing that aside when it comes to commissions and deadlines that I have versus other things in my life where I haven't been able to push that aside, and it's still a work in progress. But it's something where if I get stuck there, I know that I'm up here in my head, mm-hmm. right? And what I've really practiced at is being in my heart when I'm in the studio and just letting intuition guide me. And trust in timing. Timing always seems to work out one way or the other. Even if I cram on a project like the night before it's due, like timing always seems to work out. So it's like getting to that place where you get out of the critical mind and you just get into your own timing, your own intuition. And so, but that takes practice.
I think this brings up a good question for each of us to ask ourselves, because because everyone is different, and this is a journey of knowing yourself, right? Ask yourself the question, do I work better? Am I more prolific without deadlines, or am I more prolific with them? And be honest with yourself, okay? You're not going to get in trouble. There's no wrong answer.
Shan said, you mean undeadlines.
Indeed. So for me, I am more prolific when I am up against an undeadline. And I'm a little less prolific when I can just do whatever I want. Now, once you have that answer, right? This is just the authentic truth. I'm more prolific when I'm up against a deadline. I'm a little less prolific when I have all the time in the world. Do you like that? Does that work for you emotionally? If you don't like that, what can I do to shift myself more in the direction that I want to go? So if I would rather be able to say, I'm very prolific without any deadlines or timelines, then knowing is half the battle, as they say. Then I could take steps to orient myself towards doing more of that and setting up my own timelines, because the truth behind the truth for me, and this might be different for you, is that I work best under my own timelines not other people's timelines. So if I have that freedom and flexibility to set up my own timeline, then I could be most prolific.
Yeah.
And so that removes the icky pressure, but also keeps me like oriented in the direction.
Carrie said, congratulations, thank you. And Kathleen said, Rafi the art grandpa.
Indeed.
Diego said, I've tried to do multiple projects at the same time, but I feel that I was spreading my skills and attention too thin. So that didn't work for me. I just felt like my heart wasn't into it. Diego, it's a good point. I'm going to say here that it's not about working on multiple projects at once, right? Because it's not, you cannot multitask art. In fact, you cannot multitask anything. You can focus on one thing at a time, right? And focus on that one thing and then have something else that's there and then focus on that other thing. But you really have to determine for yourself, if you are going to do that, what is the system that you're going to use to do that? So I work on multiple pieces. If you guys watch the video that I posted on Patreon, you know that I'm right now, currently, I've got several projects going on. What I do is I'll work on a piece, and a lot of times, like, I have to wait for something to dry. The reason that I became as prolific as I am and worked on so many pieces is because I hate waiting. I hate waiting. I absolutely hate waiting for things to dry. And I have historically ruined pieces because I didn't wait long enough for it to dry. So essentially, when I get to a point in a painting where like it's going to sit there, whether I do a texture drip or something like that, where it's going to have to sit there for longer than 30 minutes, then I transition to the other piece that I'm working on. And at that point, that's behind me. I've compartmentalized, and now my full focus goes on this piece, right? It's not like trying to do multiple things at once, because you're right. Your heart's not going to be in it. You're going to be spread too thin. So it really is about compartmentalizing and putting your full focus on what's in front of you. And then if you come to a stop or you come to a halt, then you transition to something else.
Mm-hmm. The gear shift. Chris said, I have laser focus on one painting and I finish them faster this way. Each painting has its own vibe and emotion, and my emotional nervous system gets confused maybe due to drying times.
Yeah.
And that's basically it, right? If you can move between two because of drying times, then that's great.
Then that's what you do. Now I've done this for a long time and I've grown that skill up, but even still, I have days where like maybe I'll get to do something on 3 paintings because like 2 of them are like sitting there drying, and that's it. They're just having the paintings in the space where I could get to it, because a lot of it too has to do with that beginning intuition, right? Where you walk into your studio and you're like, well, what do I feel like working on today? Maybe it's going to be the piece that I'm working on for the baby, or maybe it's going to be the piece that I'm working on for here. The only time that a deadline comes in, for example, like we are doing Fam Jam this weekend. Mm-hmm. So I better do what I'm going to do with Fam Jam before this weekend. Now, I've got 3 studio days lined up for this week. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to work on it I don't know when I'm going to work on it. Basically, I'll let that feeling come to me when I'm in the studio. So that's kind of the way that I follow that intuition. If I get into studio, then I'm going to work on something. Because I also don't know. I might get a commission request come in before Fam Jam. Either way, mm-hmm. Fam Jam has to be done by Saturday. So
one way or
the other.
Shan Chan said, yeah, my choice is way better timeline-wise. It's why I do less commissions, actually. And then Shan Chan also said, you fa-chunk.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on that. For those of you who don't know what fa-chunking is, it's our fun word for breaking these projects, any project, but especially creative projects, into smaller increments, with the intention that you don't need to get it done in this sitting. You don't even necessarily have to spend a lot of time on it. You just do what you can for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 50 minutes, whatever. whatever time you can devote to it, especially if you're feeling resistance emotionally, like, oh, I feel stuck. Then if you can get yourself to do 5 minutes on it, not only can you make smaller time increments work, but then you kind of remove that resistance of feeling like, oh, I have to commit to this.
Yeah.
So, like in a day where you might only have 30 minutes between things, then can you spend 15 minutes on this creative thing? And that goes hand in hand with some advice that I heard from an artist that I have mixed feelings about this advice, but mostly I think I really resonate with it. And that artist said, quit while the energy is still high. Quit while you're still in the flow state, even though you don't want to, right? Because you feel like you could keep going. Quit while you're at the peak of flow state, because what that does is it stores that momentum in you so that you are super excited to go back to it the next possible moment you get.
Right.
So like when you're in the flow state on something and you stop it and you move on. Now, for most creatives, we don't want to do that, right? We want to work on the thing while we're in the flow state all the way up until we run out of steam. That's usually how I tend to work.
Right.
But this person was saying if you cut it off during the flow state, then you will be raring to go the next day or the next studio session. What do you think about that advice?
So I agree and I disagree, right? So this person that gave the advice, he's a writer, right? And so it makes sense in that context where like you're writing something and then when you get into that peak place, I don't know about cutting it off right in the middle, in the peak of your flow state.
Right.
I would say that when you start to feel it kind of like
starting to
taper, like getting tapered, because that's where I'll get to. It's like I'm still excited about the piece that I'm working on, but you know those moments because I'll turn to you and be like, I think I'm done.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't want to, I'm on that high of creating, and I know that once I start like dipping down, right? Once I reach a point that's like lower here, that's where I start making mistakes and overworking something.
Yes, and
right?
that you definitely should stop at that point.
Yeah.
For sure. I cannot always, I just can't cut it off sometimes in the flow state because especially with songwriting, if I stop, I will lose what's coming through me, right? Now that's a belief I have. I could believe that it'll be there waiting for me the next day when I pick up my pen or open my program. But I don't want to cut it off when it's flowing through me like, molten gold, if you will. But I like your take on it. When it starts to taper off.
Yeah, when it starts to taper, because when you're in that, like, where you're, and you're
furiously
doing it, like, you don't want to stop in the middle of that. You don't want to stop furiously sketching or doing whatever it is that you're doing. You want to like play that out until that point. But we all feel that. We all feel that moment where it's like, all right, this is starting to taper off.
Just go ahead and stop.
And then because of indoctrination into like you should be working when you're like whatever, then we'll stay there, even though maybe it feels like you kind of have that silent voice telling you like, yeah, I think I'm good.
You're good, man. You're good.
And then because then you're still excited to get back to it, but it's like, it's almost like sitting there, you have that flow state and then you mentally try to analyze what you're doing and then you get out of that flow state because you go into your head.
Yeah. And the truth about flow state too is that it is a heightened state that is not sustainable over a really long duration of time. So it does tend to come in bursts that then taper off.
Kelly said that's when you end up flying out of the shower and to find a pen.
It's true. Marty said balancing business, art balance is my newest challenge. Finding prepping for cafes to show work and cash side gig. And then word gets out and it's snowballing and I'm excited about studio flow time. It is a balance. Once things get rolling, definitely the name of the game is finding that harmonious way of existing for yourself.
That was the biggest thing because I've got a lot of projects in the studio. I've got several shows set up. There are several grants that I've applied for. There's big creative workshops and things like that we're getting invited. We've been invited to speak at several places. So like all the areas, there's this big book fair that's happening and things that are happening next year. So like there's a momentum that's taking place. And, it's like trying to find that balance of like balancing that side of things, right? Sending out emails, contacting people, setting up events, doing all that stuff, and then getting into the studio and letting go of that. And I think that it's important, like for the first time in our career, I would say that I have found a really good balance. And that's because anything that has to do with that, I might dedicate maybe an hour in the morning of looking at emails and like setting things up. But then it's a matter of getting into the studio, but also giving myself the leeway of doing a 50-50. Now, luckily, this is what I do for a career. So doing that work thing, is part of the work thing. If I had a side hustle, if I was doing, what is the thing that the kids are doing? The
like gig work?
Yeah, like gig work. If I was doing gig work, then I would probably give that some kind of sense of schedule, just to have like some kind of semblance of order to that side of things, so that when I get into the studio, I could just let loose and go crazy.
I always picture like all of your clothes flying off whenever
That's what
you
happens.
say that.
That's what happens when I go paint in the studio. I just let loose and go crazy.
It's really expressive.
Yeah.
Marie said doing so many shows this year has helped force me to put the time in the studio to stay creating instead of just coming up with even more ideas.
Yes, Marie, and that is the reason that I formed the habits that I formed of getting prolific, was because we were doing shows every weekend. So every week I was in the studio and I that became my priority. I want to have pieces for the next show that I'm excited about. And so like I got really used to creating artwork very, very fast and working on multiple pieces.
Yeah, that's how I can also say from experience that I know I'm more prolific against a deadline is from doing shows. But there is definitely a balance there. I had stints of time where self-care absolutely went out the window because I prioritized being prolific over literally everything else. And so you do have to cultivate that healthy.
And that's where the motivation. What is the motivation underneath it, right? So I loved having shows back to back because I loved being put in that position to create stuff and the challenge of creating the thing and then having it out there. And especially getting to a place where it's like you constantly have this flow of ideas and you just kind of jump on it and you really have to let go of perfectionism.
Yeah.
Like you have to let go. It would be impossible to do shows back to back to back if you were trying to be a perfectionist in your studio. Like it would cause you to shut down. So like it really teaches you to let go of that perfectionism, just get in a creating state, let yourself create and just let loose, tear your clothes off and go crazy in the studio. But the double-edged blade side of that is that you can also get into a rut routine where then you start creating product, the thing that is popular. And I would say that was the difference, that would be outline the difference between Klee and I with our experience with the market, was that Klee, not fully, but Klee went into a direction sometimes where it was like, I got to create these products to fill into space for...
I went into production mode.
Yeah, production mode.
Filling in the gaps in the trays.
Yeah.
Now, Shan brings up a cool point about multi-session creating in that flow state. I wrote a song in 2 sessions, and the music had to change in each section because the feel changed. But it builds, and it's inspirational, so it sort of works.
Absolutely.
So that's a really cool point to make about multi-session creativity.
Yep.
Is that you might bring different energies to the sessions.
I mean, that's what happens in the studio when I'm working on something and I go back to it. Like there's a different energy there, it's like you kind of, it's so funny. I love that you brought that up because like, I know that a lot of people have a hard time leaving a painting, and I'm not saying that you have to, but I would say that like when I'm working on art and let's say that I leave the painting and it's not done, right? and I come back to it or I'm doing that, it's almost like I'm having a collaboration with a different version of me. Whatever version of me is dealing with the art that day, it's like you give yourself permission to look at the art and almost get started as a collaborator with the original artist, right? And I know that sounds weird, but it's like there was Rafi creating the art, and now this day I'm a different Rafi coming in and working on this piece, right? So I have my experience that day, whatever it is that I feel like doing. And so like I love that because it does bring in a different energy. I've experienced that with music where like the first day I was writing my lyrics and they absolutely sucked so bad that I just wanted to quit everything in life that had anything to do with creativity.
Been
and then
there.
yeah, and then the next day I came in and it was like totally like fresh eyes looking at it, and it turned into something quite beautiful.
There's magical things that happen. I've experienced them a lot in songwriting where it's like, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. You can't find it, you can't find it, you can't find it. And then you just sit down one day and you're like, what if I did this? And then it's like, oh, and the clouds part and the cherubs are there and it all works. And you're like, it could have never happened, but this moment on this day. Chris said, it's never there waiting for me, the momentum. I have to, at the very least, doodle or note take to remind myself if I really am too tired to continue. However, for me, the inspiration and genius is in that flow.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of creatives could say this, that there is like a warm-up period. You don't just go into it.
Yeah, you do need a warm-up period. In fact, in the video, so we're gonna be doing a video this week about this particular thing being prolific, and there is a warm-up period when I get into studio. For me, it's like, I get into a state of meditation and like, clear my mind and really get to a place in my heart. So I'll start with something small. Maybe I'll have a sketch going or like a little thing here that I already know exactly what I'm going to do. And you kind of build that momentum and get to that place. So I think that most creatives do that. There might be creatives that just get in there and just cold turkey, like just jump right into
0
a
to
thing.
60.
That's great, but that's not the way that I do it. Everett said, Rafi, you should do a self-portrait of yourself butt-ass naked in the studio, just going wild painting with no hands.
I concur. I think we should see this art.
My studio routine.
Just let loose and paint with Rafi. That'll be the poster.
That'll be the poster for the class. I want to actually this year I want to do a workshop called Let Loose and Paint with Rafi.
Well, now we know what the marketing material is going to look like. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I have rarely experienced 0 to 60 in the studio. There have been rare occasions where the momentum is there waiting for me and I'm just like right into it because I'm so excited.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's a lead up and then a tapering and then a lead up and a tapering.
Who designed the t-shirt? Oh, Cassie did. This one?
Hey, you're wearing it.
Yeah.
Cassie, our very own Cassie, designed this wondrous t-shirt.
Yeah.
Ask me about my art.
Yeah.
I always jam out to music and sing at the top of lungs. Then I create while listening to an audiobook. That's a great process. I love that. I love singing at the top of my lungs in the studio.
It's one of my favorite things when I'm in the studio and Klee is like singing at the top of her lungs. Like that's my favorite thing. I love the energy that's in the studio when we're both in there and just the music is playing.
Yeah.
And Klee's singing. I also love listening to audiobooks.
Yes. And sometimes when I reach a really good place at my bench, I get up from my chair and I dance like obnoxiously just to like move my body. Because I can do long stints at the bench and then I feel all like, oh. So
that happens. That happens to me. Like you gotta, because you're working, well, for you being prolific is like you're in the same spot. For me being prolific is like I'm going to this painting over here, and then while that's dry, while that layer is drying because I just threw a gallon of water on it, I'm going to this painting over here.
My workspaces are very sedentary. You're in one spot doing what you're doing. So I do really try to be mindful to get up and do something. Go use the bathroom, drink water, eat something, move your body. It's all part of the process Tish said, I guess I'm one of those 0 to 60 people. Like, I just start and I work until I need to stop because life needs to happen, like food. I'm usually the Energizer Bunny. Keep going and going. And as long as you're emotionally good, right? Then that works for you.
Yeah.
But if you're like hating, if you're like doing that because you should and you're hating it, then that's a totally different energy, right?
Chris said, Ralph, my dog, jumps up if I dance and we have a little jig before getting back to it.
That's
I love that.
Cute. And of course, we know the cuteness that is Ralph, and that is an adorable ritual that you have.
Kelly said, Klee needs a massaging chair. Can you imagine if you had a massaging chair at your bench? I'd probably look over and Klee and be like,
speaking of getting more work done, perhaps a massage chair would seat me at the bench for longer stints. One of the things that is critical for me and this will be, I guess, my final little life hack here, is I am constantly cultivating mindfulness in my life, because I cannot create on the level that I want to create if I'm thinking about other things. So the idea is to be 100% present with everything I'm doing when I'm doing it and nothing else. So if I am working on jewelry, I am 100% Klee, working on jewelry, music, whatever it is. If I'm grocery shopping, I'm 100% grocery shopping. Yeah. If we're doing these streams, I'm 100% present here, listening to you, reading your comments. I'm not thinking about other things. Now, I am cultivating that because it was not necessarily a strong point for me. So it's a daily practice. Yeah. And one of the ways that I do that is through meditation. But the other way that I do that is really to just get myself in the habit of like, this is my intention, and so I'm paying attention to whether I'm paying attention when I'm doing things. And I catch myself trailing off like humans do, but I always try to bring myself back to here and be present so that I can create with all of me.
Yeah.
And not a fragmented version of myself.
That's a good way of putting it, because I would say that's one of the biggest problems. Like, if you get into studio and you're fragmented because you're thinking about this thing that's going on, or like whether or not this thing, anything that distracts you from that just makes it harder to get started on a piece, let alone work on more than one piece, or like get that piece finished. I think about it like, if I take on a commission and I am in my head and I am thinking about anything other than this commission, or B, not even thinking about the commission, just feeling my way through the commission, then basically I end up messing it up. I end up not wanting to be there. I end up feeling like there's better things I should be doing. It becomes too much conflict. And my biggest advice to anybody out there that has a studio space is be very, very aware of what you're bringing into your studio when you are coming in there. Are you presently there, or are you somewhere else and you're bringing all that drama into your studio?
Mm-hmm. Like, I can't believe what so-and-so said to me, or like, how much coffee do we have left, or you really should be mowing the grass, or just you get the picture.
Rafi, question. I stream, Shan's asking this. I stream and people always say, you should make, what should I say, or how should I say that I follow the flow without making them upset or losing a person? That's a good question. I get that a lot. And it's usually like very lovingly, like somebody's like, oh, you know what you should make? Because that's how some people learn to express, appreciation and support. My response is usually like, yeah, I don't know. That sounds good, but like, I'm not sure if, I get into that. I've said that. In some cases, when somebody's like, you know what you should make da 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 da. Depending on what it is, I'll tell them like, that's really great. That's really great advice, or that's really cool. I just, it's not really my jam. I think really at the end of the day, it's like being really honest. But I think before you're really honest, you do have to like make sure that you don't get offended by the comment. Does that make sense? Right? Because I've had moments where I've been in the middle of a live stream and somebody will say something like that. And like somewhere inside of me, like I have a story that's attached to this particular thing that they said that immediately I find myself getting offended. Like, what do you mean? You know, and I won't say that, but I know that if I respond in that moment, there's going to be a bite to it, you know, like a bite to it. And so a lot of times I'll just say like during that moment, I'll be like, cool. I'll think about that and just leave it at that. And that gives me time to be able to think about why it was that it made me upset. And, you know, if somebody were to say, you know what you should do this, then getting to a place where I have a better response. But honestly, a really great go-to for me is like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'll have to think about that.
Absolutely. My version of that usually sounds like, ooh, I'm going to let that marinate in my brain jar.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm going to take it in. I may or may not work with that idea, right? My creativity might spit that idea out at a later time as a brilliant thing, or it might just float away for someone else to pick up the idea. But I think, yeah, like almost like, you know, oh, cool, I'll take that in and see where, if anything ever comes of it, and like really not have to take one position or another on it.
That's a really good thing, because the response of like, nah, might also work. I mean, it really depends. It depends on the thing. I've blatantly been like, when I was in Pensacola and my uncle came up to me and said, you know what you should do? You should do the Pensacola beach ball and some tourist art so that you can make money. And I remember looking at him and being like, no, I'm not doing that. And that was it. That was my response. So it really just depends. I think on a stream, though, you've got these people that are loving.
Yeah, so you could just be like, oh, I'll take that. Like Tish says, I'll just say, I'll put that in my discovery book. My discovery book is ideas that I want to work on, but in my way, if that makes sense.
That's nice. I like that. Mm-hmm. That's really, really good. Good idea. I was overcomplicating it. Yeah. You know, at the end of the day, Shan, I would say that one of the most important things, and we've gotten off the topic of being prolific, but who cares? One of the most important things when it comes to this, right? And this is something that I've thought about. You know, we've built up our amazing community and family on YouTube and on Patreon over the years, and collectors and stuff like that. And it's very, very important that you also don't compromise your self in order to keep people around. That's something that I've had to really, really think about, you know, because I make some decisions that I'm like, all right, I'm going to have to change this on the YouTube channel, or like, I'm not going to do this anymore, or I want to start doing this. And you've seen that happen where a lot of people, when you start forming a community, it's almost like they become trapped by their own community. And in reality, they don't necessarily become trapped by their own community. They become trapped by what the demands they think their community are expect. Right? It's all like in your own head, where they're making all these choices and feeling all this trepidation and overcomplicating things because they're afraid that like they're going to offend somebody or something like that. And then what happens from that place is that you start feeling resentment. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like, because you're not just being honest and being like, this is, you know, like, no, I don't want to, or like whatever, or saying like, you know, yeah, that's great. I'll put that in my discovery book. It then can snowball into something else. Definitely. And so that's something that I always keep an eye on, especially because, like, you know, we have our YouTube community and we have our awesome rogues that are here with us. And the last thing that I want is for any kind of resentment to set in based on the idea that you can't be yourself.
Definitely. Right? And I think this is directly related to being prolific, actually, because if things get out of hand And if resentment or burnout sets in, this does directly affect your ability to create in a prolific fashion. And so
That is very
the
true.
point that you're making is to be following your compass. Don't be afraid of feedback
Yeah.
from people or suggestions or input. And the reason you don't have to be afraid is because you know you can take it or leave it. You can respond in a neutral fashion. What you do with it is 100% up to you. So don't be afraid of it,
Yeah.
but always be following your compass. And I mean the real compass, not the I should compass. The I should compass is not a compass.
Yeah. The moment that you start shooting on yourself, you know that you're not following the right compass.
So if there's should on your compass, get it off of there and follow that inner guidance system. That will lead to prolific creation.
Uh-huh.
Like how I brought it home there.
I do. Thank you. Marie asks, how would you describe the difference between prolific and production mode? That is a great question, Marie. So that's interesting. I'll have to think about that. So
I have an
prolific.
answer.
Oh, go for it. Go for it.
It all comes down to the energy that's behind it.
Boom.
So production mode is like you feel like you're on an assembly line and it's draining to you and you really don't want to, but you feel that you have to. And prolific is like you can't get enough of it. It lights you up. It actually supercharges you. It makes you feel more alive. And you feel like you could go all day without any breaks. Now, I don't suggest going all day without any breaks, but the difference is energetic. It's not about what you do. It's about who you be while you do it.
And it's the underlying thing, right? You know that if you're in production mode, right? Production mode means that you are maybe creating this because you think you're going to make money, right? And it's okay sometimes to be in production mode, but be highly aware of it, right? There's a difference between that. Okay, I'm going to create these. I'm going to create these 50 stickers because I have a show coming up and people love stickers, right? You want to do that, great, because that's part of your business side of what you do. But when it comes to like creating projects, you know, there's never any kind of guarantee that something is going to sell. So if you find yourself creating a lot of things, right, and getting into production mode because you think that there is a guaranteed sale, you're going to be highly discouraged for the next time when it doesn't happen.
Right.
Whereas being prolific, being prolific in of itself, right, the act of creating drives you and motivates you to keep doing it.
And they could look the same because I also want to be clear, like you could be cranking out 100 of something and feeling awesome about it.
Yep.
And that's, to me, is being prolific. It's being prolific in production mode. So at the end of the day, all that matters really is it draining you or is it making you feel alive?
Yeah.
You know?
Are you like, oh, this is awesome. Look at how many of these I've created. Or are you like, when is this going to end?
I've been in production mode and I've been like, I'm a machine. I'm unstoppable. I'm like an old Renaissance blacksmith. I'm like this. I'm like that. And I feel great about it.
And she says that out loud, you guys, in the studio.
I did
She
announce
just
it.
keeps repeating it over and over. And I'm like, we get it.
There was one day in Florida that the AC went out in our house, and I was hammering out like forged pieces, and it was like 1,000,000,000 degrees in the studio, and I was like, I'm a blacksmith from old timey times, and I was like, I love this, and you were like, that's really cool for you.
That's really cool. I'm not enjoying sweating my butt off while I'm creating art.
Yeah.
Shan Shan says, yeah, production in my mind would be making 100 of the same thing, like Prince. Prolific is creating new things in new areas or in mediums. Yeah, they make sense. Yeah, I mean, prolific could, I also, when I do my series of trees on wood, a lot of it is like leftover wood pieces from different commissions and stuff like that. And then I don't like throwing stuff away. So I'll grab all these random different size pieces of wood and then I'll do my series of trees on them. So I'll lay out all the wood and yeah, maybe I'm working on 40 pieces at once and it's very production mode. It's like bottom layer, bottom layer, bottom layer, bottom layer, top layer, like all this stuff. But I really enjoy the process of doing it. It excites me to see all my trees come to life little by little. So like there's a big difference there between it, and it really does come down to that energy, like you were saying.
Yeah, Marie's like, I've felt both on the same project. Some days I enjoy, sometimes not. I'm right there with you.
Yes.
And I would say, I think for me, like, I try to steer clear of doing the thing when the energy feels like icky.
Yeah.
If I can't shift myself into a place where I am enjoying myself, then I try to do something else. Ideally, right? If I can shift my energy into the enjoyment mode, that's great for getting in there. So, but it really does boil down to how you're feeling.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I would say that with that, we have reached the end of the podcast.
Indeed.
Yeah. So thank you, Rogues, so much for all your questions, comments, and insight. You guys made this podcast so much better than it would have been had it just been us talking about being prolific.
As always.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for being here. And for everybody listening to this at home, thank you so much for being here. You guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you for listening. And if you like this and you want to subscribe to us, you can subscribe to us wherever it is. I don't know what platform you're listening to this on. By the way, our amazing rogues are our rogue family that are on Patreon, and that's how they have access to these live streams and hanging out with us. So,
and they also make most of our content possible.
Yeah. Yes. They are who make the content possible. I figured I'd actually like promote our Patreon because I always forget to do that. So
True.
Did that.
Done.
There you go. Done. So thank you guys so much for being here. You guys are awesome. And yeah, we will talk to you later. You want to say goodbye, Klee?
Good day.
Adios.